Welcome to Stronger Together, Voices United. I'm Dara Starr Tucker, host of The Front Page on Radio Free 102.3 FM, KJLH. I'm partnering with Univision to shed light on the ongoing attacks on immigrant communities in California. From ICE raids to illegal kidnappings, families are being torn apart in ways that many don't fully see. Together, we'll explore the legal and cultural landscape, highlight the voices of community organizations and activists on the ground, and offer tools for understanding and action. Because this fight goes beyond policy. It speaks to the people, the hearts, and the future of justice in our communities. When people talk about ICE raids, the conversation usually stops at immigration policy or law enforcement. But what's often left out is the devastating ripple effect that these raids have on entire communities, on businesses, on workers, on families just trying to survive. The truth is that when an ICE raid happens, it doesn't just hit one household. It shakes entire neighborhoods and local economies. Today, I'm joined by Shannon Camacho of Inclusive Action for the City. Inclusive Action for the City is a Los Angeles-based nonprofit transforming public spaces through inclusive design, community-led research, and equitable policy to uplift underserved neighborhoods. Shannon Camacho, who is a senior policy associate with Inclusive Action for the City, is here to help us understand the full cost of these raids, not just in dollars, but in the fear, disruption, and economic devastation that they leave behind. This is really a conversation about the price that we all pay for these immigration policies. And I'm happy to be joined also by Yarel Ramos of Univision. Thank you so much for being here with us as well to help us get a little more of an on-the-ground point of view with this conversation. So Shannon, I want to ask you, when you think about these ICE raids in Los Angeles, what do they look like from the ground level in your community?
Yeah, well, I think it's been very different this time around. I think during the first Trump administration, we very clearly saw a lot of our organizations that are nonprofits working with immigrants on the ground in different parts like the Valley, South LA, East LA. We would see at-home arrests where ICE would go to individuals' homes very early in the morning, target them, arrest usually one or two people. Things are very different now. Now what we're seeing is, very unfortunately, the mass racial profiling of community members in places where a lot of people gather. For example, outside Home Depots, in corridors where there are lots of street vendor communities that are out and about vending. ICE has been targeting those kinds of places and trying to round up, honestly, as many people as they can without respecting due process, without any kind of shred of evidence to arrest an individual person. And I think a lot of us have seen through media, through social media, of the different kinds of arrests that these have been very violent. There are instances where people have been hurt by Department of Homeland Security agents in the ways that they're arresting them. And we're seeing these spread throughout the county, in really almost every single neighborhood. For the past few months, we've seen mass amounts of people, 10, sometimes more people arrested in one single operation. And so that's a little bit of the kinds of things we're seeing on the ground, specifically street vendors and day laborers also being very targeted.
And Yarel, from your point of view, working in media, what impact, the immediate impact, would you say this has on families and communities when these raids happen in this way?
Yeah, it's been catastrophic, to say the least, not just for the dynamics of families and homes, but also businesses, communities, the natural occurrence that happens in the pockets of society within our city. I think what Shannon mentioned, people have been hurt, people have died after these raids, because of these raids. We've seen a number of situations, not just at where it started. We saw it first with these warehouses in the garment district, where it was this violent crash of immigration enforcement. A lot of them not identifying themselves with masks, something that we would only think, oh, this does not happen in our backyard, right? This happens in other countries. It's happening here. It's happening here where there's so much commotion and there's so much uncertainty, and there's also not a lot of answers, because we ask questions every day to Border Patrol, to ICE, to the federal government. We've gotten very few answers. I could tell you that even as a media space and many other media outlets struggling with this, is just even getting any answers from this administration. There's no transparency. There's so many questions of where do they take these people? Why are they ending up at Alligator Alcatraz? Why are there suggestions of them going to another country that's not their home country? And then the toll of it all, right? We were talking about like the economic impact that creates for all of us here. And in the city where we all live and contribute and are so connected. And then everything and what is left of it, right? Like what is left when we're seeing the Supreme Court siding with the White House in terms of racial profiling, because ideally it was undocumented criminals. That was the first. They're coming for criminals. There were no warrants. There's no evidence of high crime rates with these communities. And then it was undocumented people. Well, now it's just people that are brown, that speak Spanish, and that work in in low-paying jobs. So what's next? What's going to happen after? And we've seen it. Citizens being detained, residents being detained, and there's just still so many questions and no answers.
Yeah. Well, Shannon, I want to ask you about the disruptive factor that these raids bring to communities, that they bring to businesses specifically. When a business loses workers, when workers are afraid to show up for work, what impact are you seeing that have on the business community here in Los Angeles?
It definitely is far and wide. And I think exactly like you were mentioning, the fact that this has touched so many different industries. We at Inclusive Action for the City, we work with a lot of brick and mortar small businesses. So a lot of our clients are immigrants themselves. They come from mixed status families. Some folks are themselves undocumented. We also work with a lot of street vendors. And so we can absolutely say that these raids have touched pretty much everybody, obviously in very, very different ways. And I can speak to, for example, we have clients who have shared that they've had to close their business because of the impact of, one, being afraid to go out and work, but also, two, the fact that foot traffic in places like Boyle Heights, near Mariachi Plaza, places like Van Nuys, and near swap meets where there used to be so much more foot traffic, that has died down significantly. And so that has had the ripple effect of then folks losing out on income, losing out on the number of customers and clientele, and then ultimately having to make the very hard decision to close down. And it has happened.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one very serious way that we're seeing this economic toll. Another very serious thing that we're noticing with our clients, but also community members that we communicate with and all these different organizations, nonprofits, is housing. The fact that people are not being able to go out and work, specifically street vendors, for example. Corridors like Boyle Heights and the San Fernando Valley and Van Nuys, it is so different. If you were to drive down Cesar Chavez near where our office is in February, and now you were to do the same thing, it is unbelievable how different and how much more quiet it is. It was a space with vendors in almost every single corner, folks selling fruit and different things, and now that is absolutely not the case. There are a couple of folks that are out, and this is due to the fear, right? And so I think that also contributes to a decline in the local economy. There's less foot traffic. The brick and mortars that are around those businesses also are losing business. And I think we're seeing that in so many different parts of the county where folks then are having the after effects of not being able to afford their rent because their business is not doing as well. And so that's something that we're seeing. And we know that those issues are not going to stop, especially as enforcement continues. So our organization and other organizations are really trying to figure out ways to support community members in this time where they're just losing so much income and the bills still come. We still do. So we have to figure out a way to support them, to supplement that in some way, since we know enforcement is still happening.
Yeah. Well, Yarel Ramos, you work in headlines. You deal in headlines and the work that you do, working in media as you do. And I know it can be easy to hear headlines, and I always try to encourage my audiences, look past the headlines and remember to follow up on some of these headlines, because oftentimes maybe there are not as many wins that are happening as we think, and the deeper story lies beneath the headlines. So I kind of want you to talk to us about some of the hidden costs of these raids that we're maybe not seeing in the headlines.
I mean, there's so much, and I feel like touching with what Shannon mentioned, and even your initial question about like we think of the economic impact as just like, oh, they don't have people who are apprehended or families who are impacted just don't have the income, but it's a domino effect, right? Because what happens when a lot of these families that for the most part are scared, don't want to go outside, they're not spending, they're not shopping, they're not they're not even sending their kids to school. So what does that happen for, we're talking about money. Everything around us is money. Funding for schools, funding for spaces, mobility when it comes to like even traveling, buying a car, buying anything, that's non-existent to these families. They're just literally trying to survive with not leaving their homes. So I think for the stories that are not being told are like also with issues with mental health with these kids, with these families and these dynamics. Like what's it going to look like in the next few years when a lot of children are not going to school because of the same fear. When they're missing out on medical appointments, like what is that going to look like in the next few months when they're not getting their vaccinations? Are we going to see an uptick in illnesses for these communities? That again is a domino effect for everybody else. We're so connected in LA. We live next to each other. We do everything next to each other. So it's something that's impacting this community right now. And even when it comes, and we talk about the Supreme Court and this decision on racial profiling, we automatically think, well, that's not us, right? It's not going to affect us. I'm a citizen. But it can. It has happened. So we're very close and very connected to that. And I think those are sometimes the stories that we miss and like getting by the headlines every day, getting by like what's the news story of the day, like what is the emotional impact it's going to leave, that this is all going to leave on all of us,
We are talking today with Shannon Camacho of Inclusive Action for the City and Yarel Ramos of Univision. We're talking about the hidden impact, both economic and community-wide, of these ICE raids that are happening. Shannon, I want to go to you with maybe some insight on how business owners are responding to this disruption. Are they finding ways to step up and support the community right now?
I will say that that's actually something that gives me, in this very, very dark time as we're, experiencing these ongoing arrests, that's something that does give me hope, is just the amount of our own clients that we work with in Inclusive Action, but also small business owners and street vendors who we haven't worked with, but who are coming to our organization asking for ways to, one, obviously get support in the different ways that they need, but also how to get involved, how to share information with their neighbors, within vendor communities and different corridors. It's usually quite a few vendors that are all in the same space, and folks will reach out to try to find ways in which they can share know your rights information with the people that they're working besides or their customers. And so we as Inclusive Action and a lot of our partner organizations as well have really utilized that reality and created posters, created pamphlets, know your rights materials that we've been giving out to business owners who've been coming to us so that they can share it out with their neighbors, with their community members. And although it is, these reminders of, these are your constitutional rights, and obviously we've seen that ICE and DHS have not been respecting the constitutional rights of folks, it does make some kind of difference to provide folks with this sense of, there is some agency that you have to protect yourself. Obviously, we're also providing information for legal resources. And I think that's another thing that a lot of community members have been trying now to prepare themselves ahead of time, right? To make sure that let me get a legal consultation, let me speak with an immigration attorney before it's too late. So I think that's something that's been really amazing. And then another thing I'll say is that in addition to that services, we also do a lot of advocacy. And I think through that advocacy, we are working with street vendors, some of these folks who are undocumented, and just the amount of dedication, the amount of courage that they've been showing us these past few months to continue advocating for. We have a state bill currently that is going to, it's going to protect street vendors by preventing their private data from being shared with ICE. And the vendors who've been advocating alongside us have not stopped their advocacy. They're still, going to Sacramento to give testimony. They're still doing interviews. They're still calling their assembly members. And I think that gives us a lot of hope because these are business owners. These are leaders who don't see, their hope doesn't end with what we're seeing on the ground. They're still motivated to change the outcome of what we're seeing in LA. So I think that's one way that we're seeing folks respond.
Yeah. Well, Yarel, I want to know from your point of view, what can be done, if anything, right now to sort of mitigate harm. I mean, I hate that it has to come to that point where we're not necessarily even talking about making any forward advances in terms of immigration policy. Now it really just is about harm mitigation. But what steps would you say that we're even able to take right now, just to make sure that this has as little harm that creates as little harm as possible for immigrant communities?
Right. I mean, it's such a sad even thing to think about, right?
Yeah.
Like it's the less harm that we can that they can endure. I think supporting organizations, supporting initiatives to, either take food to a lot of these families. A lot of these families that haven't been able to. I mean, we know families that haven't left their home in a very long time. And some homes that don't have AC right now when it's really hot. Be part of these initiatives to not only support the families that are struggling right now, but also be on the lookout. There's a group that does amazing work, Unión del Barrio, and they are patrolling the streets. They're patrolling Home Depots. They're patrolling warehouses. They have an Adopt a Corner initiative as well, where like even just be there for a few hours and hang out with some street vendors or day labor workers to talk to them, to see what their needs are, to help them out. We've seen it all around social media too, that when you see a street vendor and they're selling your favorite bowl of fruit or a meal or maybe give them some extra money, maybe, help them out, take them somewhere else, maybe just reach out and ask them, like, what do you need? What are you struggling with right now? I think there's many ways that we can at least be a shoulder, provide whatever it is that we can, to make sure that more families don't suffer, from what we've been seeing the last few months.
Well, Shannon, Camacho, I want to come back to you as we are wrapping up our conversation right now. I kind of want to piggyback off of what Yarel was speaking about, but what are some of the practical ways that you would say that individuals, Angelenos, and business owners can do to support people, to support families right now during this really difficult time?
Absolutely. I think everything that was echoed is absolutely the case. And one very, very concrete example, and I think this is something that we've been very much, encouraging everybody to do as a small way to support the street vendor community in Los Angeles specifically is we're Inclusive Action. We're part of the LA Street Vendor Campaign, which is a coalition of organizations. We actually were the organizations that worked together to legalize street vending in the state of California. And since the raids began, we understood very clearly from the community members we work with, those that organize with us, that there were dire needs. Folks were going to get evicted. Folks were going to become homeless. And so we created an LA Street Vendor Solidarity Fund. And this is something that we created a GoFundMe, and we, put it out there saying there are so many vendors that we work with directly that are not able to go out, or they're experiencing such a decrease in the number of customers that it is affecting them in every aspect of their lives. And so we've been able to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars and help hundreds of vendors with direct cash payments.
Wow.
This has been an incredible way to support people during this time. And so one of the most concrete ways to support folks is, donate to a fund like this. This money goes directly to the hands of street vendors and trusted organizations that work to do the outreach and work to make sure that vendors are having their needs met. And so I think that's a very specific way that people can get involved and really support folks during this time, because the need will continue. Yeah. So I think that's one way. Another way is to, I think, really support advocacy that really digs at the heart of why this is happening. We know that enforcement is going to unfortunately continue due to the fact that this department now has billions more dollars because of the recent additional funding that's coming to the Department of Homeland Security. We also we have a state bill, SB 635, which is the Street Vendor Business Protection Act. This bill is currently moving through the state legislature, and this bill would prevent the sharing of private data of vendors with immigration enforcement. So the way that it works now is folks get their permits through cities and counties. There is nothing preventing those entities in the cities and counties from sharing that information with ICE currently. And so this bill would prevent that. And one way to get involved is to call your assembly member, support bills like 635 that really dig at the heart of enforcement and try to put guardrails so that this doesn't continue into the future. Because unfortunately, we do have years left of this administration. And so we want to make sure to build up as much protection as we can. So that's another way I think folks can definitely get involved at the moment.
Yeah, I appreciate that practical advice. And how can folks get involved with Inclusive Action for the City, your organization? How can they get involved, whether it's financial or getting their hands dirty and actually getting out there into the community? Let them know how they can get involved.
Absolutely. So our website is inclusiveaction.org. And on that website, really it goes over all the different kinds of work that we do, all the service work that we do, the loans that we give out to small businesses, and ways that community members who are looking for that kind of financial support can get it through our organization. But then also all the different ways of all the different advocacy campaigns that we're engaged in. And so we have everything on there. We're working on that state bill, SB 635, but we also do a lot of county work as well, advocating for funds to go to workers, immigrant workers in Los Angeles County. And so inclusiveaction.org, you can go on there, you can see all the different ways to get involved, as well as donate. And really, there are so many different ways that folks can get involved, including donating to the Solidarity Fund. So I would direct folks to go there and see what we're about.
Wonderful. I want to thank Shannon Camacho of Inclusive Action for the City for joining me and for helping to shed light on the economic toll of these ICE raids. We've heard today how fear spreads beyond families, how businesses lose workers and customers, and how entire communities are forced to adapt and resist in order to survive. The message is clear. ICE raids weaken the economic and social fabric of all of Los Angeles. So the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? Well, we can start with supporting immigrant workers, standing with small businesses, and demanding accountability from leaders. Because when immigrant families thrive, Los Angeles thrives. Their fight is our fight, and their survival is our survival. Thank you for joining me for Stronger Together, Voices United. I'm Dara Starr Tucker. Thank you for listening, and thank you for being a part of this fight for dignity, justice, and a stronger Los Angeles.